It's an interesting time we live in because as much as we love the digitalisation of business and the entrepreneurialism and the innovation that we're seeing being promoted everywhere, and what it means is that I think a far larger number of people who may not necessarily have business backgrounds or the systems and sophistication to operate a business can very quickly access and run a business. And the trouble for any of you who engage these parties is that all that glitters is not gold when it comes to third-party workforce service providers. And I think Plutus was a very good example of that. A payrolling company. First thing is, what's a payrolling company? There's probably 3, 4, 5 different definitions of what that is. Do they employ? Don't they employ? Whose liability is it? Is it yours? Is it theirs? Is it? Are they simply providing a matching solution similar to maybe what an Airtasker claims that they do? So very quickly you have to become an expert in procurement and really being able to dig in to actually understand what is the service that's being provided. So I don't yet know what Plutus was. All I know is that they were criminals and that they were, of course, taking money from clients, claiming to be paying contractors, so-called independent contractors, and then of course squirreling that away and not paying GST. Probably one of the most bold and almost mind-bogglingly stupid criminal activities you could ever imagine. I think they even said in this recent case that we'll probably get away with it for a year, and they then went and bought high-speed cars and all these sort of things. But take Plutus as an example of the stupid end of criminal and unprofessional activity. But there's a whole heap in the middle there that think they're doing the right thing, and they're providing these payroll third-party solutions. But in fact, they're probably not even meeting their basic obligations as employers or, principals of contractors. So what it says to us is that we have to be increasingly aware of knowing who are legitimate providers. Do they actually have the back end to sustain this? Do you potentially have an accessorial liability that comes under the Fair Work Act? So what it means is that we have to be far more astute around being able to make smart decisions about who is going to be providing those parties in. And just because it works for you doesn't mean that it's actually going to be lawful. And a lot of that comes on the back of what I'm calling the franchising of litigation. We're seeing new franchises of ways in which we can see claims being made. I mean, the original and arguably the best were the Fair Work Ombudsman, but more and more are moving outside of that into, we've seen the CFMEU running class actions. We've got litigation funders from the UK coming into the market saying, I'm no longer going to be investing in hedge funds. I'm now investing in class actions in Australia against large, in relation to large workforces where they're being supplied to clients with very deep pockets. And we're seeing more accessibility directly to the courts as well. So you throw those two things together, complexity, misrepresentation, entrepreneurialism with franchising of litigation, and we've got a really, really big issue here, especially for those who ultimately, I think, and I'd be interested in Nat's view here, the Fair Work Ombudsman will look for, up the chain, to be held liable.
So the Fair Work Ombudsman, in every single matter that they investigate, will look for accessories. So there's a number of reasons for that, but the accessorial liability provisions are long-standing in the Fair Work Act, and they will start with the employer, usually a company, but they will look for directors, they will look for advisors. HR advisors and accountants have been on the other end of Fair Work action and have been penalised by the courts. And what they're looking for there are the individuals who were involved in the key decisions that resulted in underpayments. They are looking for people with knowledge, that is what the law requires, but knowledge can also be decisions to not look. So you cannot close your eyes to the potential exposure. And it's interesting, Charles, the point you make about where the challenges might come from. So originally, in the old IR world of conciliation and arbitration, it was a union's responsibility. It actually, compliance was socialised later, if you like, in this area, because the Fair Work Ombudsman only came along when Work Choices was invented as a response to that, arguably. There was some interesting politics going on at the time, for those of us who remember. That's where the enforcer came from. That's where the government enforcer came from. And the reason that we're seeing litigation funders pay attention suddenly in this area is because one small flaw in a payroll system, one entitlement not coded correctly, or these cases of people just deciding that the agreements don't operate with respect to certain cohorts of workers, multiplied over several workers, several sites, 6 years. 6 years you've got to go back, right, under the statute of limitations. And so that adds up to a big number, and it may only be one thing. It might be meal breaks not being provided. It might just be particular penalties not being paid with respect to certain cohorts of workers. There are complexities in awards that payroll systems are struggling to manage. And one of the things, in the short time I've been at Deloitte, I have formed this view. People who sell payroll systems are really good at selling payroll systems. WTF do they actually know about industrial relations?